morning. My name is Pastor Becca. I'm part of the team here at Washington Cathedral, and I'm so glad to be sharing with you this morning with my friend and mentor, Pastor Linda, and Rhonda's going to be sharing her testimony as well. Today we get to talk about loneliness. And if you've ever been through any tough time of any kind, you've probably experienced some degree of loneliness. Loneliness happens for all sorts of reasons: bereavement, friends letting you down, lacking intimacy in your relationships, or simply going through a tough time where you feel like no one else understands or they can relate to you. Well, if you've been through a time of loneliness, or if you're going through one right now, I have really good news for you, and it comes from God's holy word. I'd like to read to you this morning from Psalm 68, verses 4 through 6. Sing praises to God and to his name. Sing loud praises to him who rides the clouds. His name is the Lord. Rejoice in his presence. Father to the fatherless, defender of widows. This is God, whose dwelling is holy. God places the lonely in families. He sets the prisoners free and gives them joy, but he makes the rebellious live in a sun-scorched land. Isn't this good news that God cares about those who are lonely? He doesn't just say, I'm sorry you're lonely, good luck with that. In the Psalms it says God places the lonely in families, that God actually does something about our loneliness, that he sends us people to connect with when we're going through difficult times. God cares about lonely people. He cares about people who are lonely because of depression and people who are lonely because of autism. People who are lonely because they're single, and people who are lonely because they're struggling with fertility. People who are lonely because they're in prison. People who are lonely because they've lost a spouse or a friend. People who are lonely because they have trouble fitting in. People who are lonely because they've been abused. No matter what our reason for loneliness, God cares about us all. 1 Peter 5:7 says, cast your cares on the Lord because he cares for you. God knows what you're going through. He made you and he loves you. You might feel nervous to open up to God, like he can't possibly understand what I've gone through. But Luke 5:16 says something pretty surprising. It says, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. That Jesus himself experienced loneliness. And if you remember his friends, they were pretty crummy, right? They abandoned him and let him get killed. That's not a very good friend, right? They betrayed him. And so when you're going through a time where you feel like the people in my life just aren't adequate, I'm lonely, I'm going through a tough time, God cares about you. He wants to provide those people in your life, and he understands that feeling because Jesus himself has gone through it. I think the reason God gives us so many of the guidelines in the Bible is because he cares about us when we feel lonely. I was thinking as I prepared this sermon, what would each person in this room's mom want me to say to them? Because so often moms just hearts break when they know their kids are going through a time of loneliness and they're struggling to connect with friends. And God is like that really good parent who cares so much when we're going through times of loneliness. And I think that's why he gave us things like the 10 Commandments. When you look through the 10 Commandments, it's kind of like a safeguard from loneliness. It keeps you from doing socially isolating behaviors like murder. It's going to make it trouble to have friends. But also things like lying and adultery and coveting and all those things that can kind of push people away out of our lives. God commands us, don't do that. You're going to need people in your life, and that's going to push them away. God also gives us other commands like honor your father and mother. It doesn't say honor your father and mother when they're not getting on your nerves, because then none of us would have relationships with our parents, right? It just says, honor your father and mother. And this is the only commandment that comes with a blessing. It says, honor your father and mother, that it may go well with you in the land. Because God knows how much we need family. And it's not a perfect family. It's not a family that's, never going to disappoint you or, be insufficient for you. He knows we need those relationships. So you need to honor your father and mother. You're going to need your family. God says in Genesis 2:18, it's not good for man to be alone. God knows this isn't what we're created for. We're not created to be lonely. And that's why I think God gave us also the commandment, honor the Sabbath day and keep it holy. This is a commandment to come to church week in and week out. And I'm a millennial. I get the urge to come when it's just convenient, as many in my age group do. But there's something special about honoring the commandment to honor the Sabbath day and to keep it holy. When you come week in and week out, you form not only a deeper relationship with God, but a deeper relationship with everyone else who's around you. And I've faced periods of loneliness in my life, but I've had this safeguard in that I've, since I was a baby, been here every Saturday night at 5:30, every Sunday at 9:30 and 11, every Wednesday night, usually to a TLC group and hanging out with you guys throughout the week because I grew up as a pastor's kid. I've got to be so involved in so many of the relationships with the people here at Washington Cathedral, and that's safeguarded me from a lot of periods of loneliness where I've still gone through it. But when I've had a tough time, I've been able to call my friend and cry on the phone and say, I need you to come help me with my kids because I'm just having a tough time. And it's one of my friends that I've grown up with in this church since I was a baby. And we have that relationship because we've learned to honor the Sabbath day and to keep it holy. And if you just take a moment and look around this room, you may not know everyone here, but I know most of you, and you are some pretty awesome people. If you're going through a season of loneliness, there are people sitting next to you or behind you or in front of you that would love to be there for you and encourage you. And they're not going to be perfect. They're not going to be everything that you need in your life, but they'll be there. And if you call them, they'll have your back, and they'll do what they can to take care of you and look after you. And I think that's why God told us to honor the Sabbath day and keep it holy, not just so we can be close to him, but also because he knows how much we need to gather together because we need each other. God's blessed me from being a part of this church community with so many of the relationships. When I serve in the high school group on Thursday nights, so many of the kids, I got to hold them when they were born, and then be their camp counselor when they're in 3rd through 5th grade, and then baptize them when they're in middle school group. And now that they're in high school group, if they're going through a tough time, there's just a depth to our relationship that's there because we've been able to be part of the same church community, that they've honored the Sabbath day, and so have I, and that's strengthened our relationship. So when they're going through a time of loneliness, we can really encourage each other and be there for each other. God gives us so many tools, like the 10 Commandments, but he also gives us the Psalms. If you are lonely and you're going through a tough time, it can be hard to open up to anyone. Your inclination is to kind of retreat back into yourself, and even from God. But the Psalms start to give us words to pray so that you can reach out to God and reestablish that connection. And sometimes they're so honest and so real, it's almost embarrassing to read. Like, King David prayed this. I probably shouldn't know that detail of his life, but it's there, and it helps you learn to be that honest and real with God too. One of those prayers I want to give you as a tool for periods of loneliness in your life is Psalm 25, verses 16 through 21. And when it's really hitting you hard, this can be a place to pray. Turn to me and be gracious to me, for I am lonely and afflicted. Relieve the troubles of my heart and free me from my anguish. Look on my affliction and my distress, and take away all my sins. See how numerous are my enemies, and how fiercely they hate me. Guard my life and rescue me. Do not let me be put to shame, for I take refuge in you. May integrity and uprightness protect me, because my hope, Lord, is in you. We need tools like the Psalms, like the Ten Commandments, like the relationships with people we have in the church to safeguard us for periods of loneliness. Because it's not a matter of if you're going to feel lonely, it's when. We all face tough times, and we all go through periods of loneliness. This might surprise you, but before I was a pastor, I was a boxer. And I took a lot of kickboxing and self-defense classes, and I loved it. And I did it for a couple of years when I was in my late teens. And it was really intense training for if you ever got attacked, because we would do like how to fight someone who's taller than you, how to fight someone who has a knife, how to use anything in the room as a weapon, what to say if someone's going to attack you. And we would even practice like someone hitting you in the face, and you stare them down like, do it again. It was really intense, like a hardcore women's self-defense class, and I just loved it. And, we'd practice and rehearse for if we ever felt afraid or vulnerable, because most women go through a time where they do feel afraid or vulnerable, and you need to be prepared for that. And later, after I took that class for a couple of years, I was living and working in Seattle as a barista, and there was a predator out terrorizing women around the Seattle area, and he came into my coffee shop, and he was staring me down, and he was trying to intimidate me, and I just froze. I was terrified. I had just moved there, so I didn't know anyone in the area. It's not like I could call a friend and be like, come help me, because the only person I had was my professor's cell phone number, and I didn't want to call him. And so I just froze, and I didn't know what to do. And then all of a sudden I remembered, I've trained for this. And I looked at him and I realized I could take him in a fight. When you're training to fight, you learn to size people up pretty quickly, and don't mess with that person, or yeah, I could take him. This guy I could take easy. And I didn't fight him. I just looked at him and realized I don't have to be afraid. So I went and I called the cops, and we waited for them to come, and I was okay. And I think the same is true for you. You are more powerful than you realize. That you have a connection to a living God who loves you, who cares about you, who's equipping you to go through moments of loneliness and to come through stronger and connected to Him. God wants to give us all these tools in our toolbox, like honoring the Sabbath day, like praying the Psalms, like reaching out to our community, so that when those moments of loneliness strike, that we can lean on Him. And God promises to never give us more than we can bear. It might feel excruciating at times to feel that lonely, to be going through that depth of a trial, but God will never give us more than we can bear. Sometimes He doesn't give us what we want, though. And sometimes we think, oh, if I just had this perfect spouse or a friend like this, or if my kids were just a little bit easier, then maybe I wouldn't feel so alone. But it doesn't exactly work that way. God gives you what you need and not always what you want. I'm in my 20s, so a lot of my friends come to me and say, if I was just married to the perfect spouse, I wouldn't feel lonely. And CNN just reported the study that 60% of married people feel lonely. That, there's so many people who have what you think should be perfect, and yet they still feel alone. But God will take care of you, and He will send you what you need. I had an experience right after having Oscar. He was about a month old, and I was needing to go preach to the high school group, but I was just having such a tough day, and I needed my mommy. So I called her on the phone, and she didn't answer. And I was just disappointed. My mom was the one who I wanted to talk to. I wanted her to pray for me. I wanted her to know what I was going through, to remind me of what that was like. And she didn't answer. So I called my dad, and he didn't answer. And then I called my sister, and she didn't answer. And then I started calling through all my friends' lists, and no one was answering their phones. And I just was so frustrated because I needed someone, and I was trying to reach out. I was trying to reach out to my community, and it just wasn't working. So I loaded my kids up in the car because it's just too frustrating being stuck in our house. So I took them to the park, and we grabbed dinner. And when I started to walk towards the park, I ran into this woman. It was one of those awkward moments where you can either say hi to the stranger that's walking with you, or you can pretend to not see them like most people in Seattle do. And I'm always the awkward person who says hi. And so I said hi to her, and I actually got to know her really well, and she was a Christian. Her name was Florence. She had just moved here from Zimbabwe, and she was looking after her grandson, and I learned all about her whole extended family and what Zimbabwe was like for her when she grew up there, and she was a Christian, and by the end of that hour, we had shared a dinner together, sat and talked, and I was encouraged that God sent me just what I needed. It wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't, my mommy, like I felt like I needed in that moment, but it was a friend, and God took care of my need in that moment. And it was so funny because she left to go take care of her other grandkids in Texas for a few months. And then like 3 months later, I was having another really tough day, loaded the kids in the car, went to a different park and couldn't get a hold of anyone. And there was Florence again. And we ran into each other and we caught up and we encouraged each other again. And it was amazing how God just kept putting this friend that I needed in my path. And the same is going to be true for you, that God knows what you're going through, that he loves you. There's not going to be that one person in your life who is the perfect friend or meets your every need, but we have a friend in Jesus Christ who sticks closer than a brother. Jesus said, I no longer call you servants, I call you friends. If we put our trust in God and let him meet our deepest emotional needs, he can heal us and encourage us because God really does love you. He cares about you and he knows what you're going through.
Thank you, Becca. It's it's been fun to work with Becca on this message. This is the first time that we've had an opportunity to do this, and what a blessing! It's Becca and I have more in common than a lot of people know. She grew up in this church, literally, physically. She was born. I think she was born in the cafeteria. I'm not sure, but from the first time that she came out of the hospital, Jackie had her at church, and Tim was holding her up and praying with her. And I watched her grow and blossom into a beautiful woman, mother, and pastor. And I feel like I've been a part of that. I'm just so proud of her. But we're both the babies of the family. We both love this church. I feel like I grew up in this church because I had my spiritual growth here. I started here when I was 36, and I won't tell you how old I am now, but 70's coming soon. And so I've been in this church longer than Becca's been alive. So, my nourishment and my growth has come from here, but this whole idea of loneliness, I hope that you can hear where we're going with this, is because, alone no more. Loneliness is at an epidemic level in our society. There are more people feeling lonely than ever before. And, the bigger we get, the more lonely people get. And, it's a sad commentary. And so, we need to address this. We need to address this in the lives of the people that we love, in our own lives. We need to think about our neighbors who are alone. We need to understand this whole thing of loneliness. And my first experience with loneliness was as a young girl. I grew up on a farm, way out in the country. And I grew up with not a lot of siblings around because I was the baby in the family. My brothers were 13 and 14 years older than me. So, by the time I was 5, they were gone. And so here I am on a farm by myself, no brothers and sisters, my mom and dad, who are wonderful people. And the closest child being about 5 miles away. So it wasn't like I had the opportunity to play with a lot of kids. And but I did have my cat, my dogs, my horse, all of the animals. I can talk to ducks and chickens. And, that was my companionship. But I longed for, companionship of sister or a brother or someone who I could play with and share with that was my same age. As a matter of fact, I'll never forget when I was a little girl, the grade school was across the street from our neighbor's house, and I was always going over to see my neighbor, who was kind of like my adopted grandma. Her name was Husu, and I called her Shushu because I couldn't say Husu. And I would go over and spend hours talking to her. She was like my best friend. And I was sitting on the front porch, and the kids were out in the playground in the school across the street from her, and they were having a ball. They were yelling and screaming and playing on the monkey bars and swings and everything. And I sat there and I looked and I said, Shushu, someday I'm going to go over there and learn to scream and yell like the rest of those kids. And it was that sense of a longing to be with some people that I could play with, that I could relate to. And that was my first sense of kind of like loneliness. And I really believe that influenced my life in good ways and in some negative ways as well. You know, the good way is that I longed for a relationship. So when I got to school, I made friends. You know, and I made very close friends. And I have friendships that, you know, I still communicate with friends from way, way back. And because those people were very important in my life, and they still are. And I am more of an outgoing person because of that, because I want to get to know you. I want to say hello to you. So those are the good things that came out of that childhood. But the bad thing that came out of that is I did not like to be alone. I did not like that feeling of loneliness. And I married my husband, Rich, and he traveled. From the day we were married, he traveled. And he would go off, when he was in the Air Force, he would go away on assignment. When he went to work at an advertising agency, he traveled for his business. And when he was away, I could not sleep. I could not sleep at night. I was so anxious about being alone. I was afraid. It was just a horrible feeling. And so whenever he was gone, I was not sleeping. And it was like, you know, it was embarrassing to me. And I mean, we're talking for years this took place. As a matter of fact, you know, some of you who know me from way back, Pastor Tim, I know, does remember this, is that I would sometimes call them because I would have anxiety attacks at night. And Steve and Diane Sibley, bless their hearts, I went and slept at their house many times. You know, it was something that I just could not get a handle on. I did not want to be alone. I felt so alone. I loved the Lord. You know, I had friends, but there was this loneliness that crept into my life. And it was embarrassing to me because I was like, I am a grown adult. You know, I am a successful. At that time, I was a successful businesswoman. What is with this? Why can't I get over this? And I would kind of beat myself up over it. And one night, when Rich was gone, I thought, I cannot do this. I cannot do this anymore. Something has to give. And so I was just praying, God, I don't know what to do. Help me. And oftentimes when I have those kind of prayers, I open up my Bible because I figured this is God's word. He's speaking to me. You know, something will be said. And I came across Psalm 91. And when you get an opportunity, you can read that. But here's the words that popped out at me of Psalm 91. If you make the Lord your refuge, He will order His angels to protect you wherever you go. And I just, right then, it was like God stuck His finger in my brain and He said, do you get it? Right now, I have my angels all around you. You are not alone. You are never alone. And I just visualized God's angels holding hands, going around my house, protecting me, in keeping me safe. And I slept, not like a baby, I slept like an adult. I slept so soundly. And I never had that problem of being fearful of being alone again. God used his word in a beautiful way to just grab me. Charles Durham, in his book, When You Are Feeling Lonely, says this: loneliness is a signal to us that we have a relationship deficit, that something's missing and that we need to take care of it and remedy it. So in a way, that chronic, and I'm talking about that chronic loneliness that brings us into behavior problems like I was experiencing, that feeling that no one is ever there for us, that we're just, here we are all alone. And we get those feelings that so many times, like Becca said, there's a whole list of things that bring us to that. When we get there, God is trying to tell us something. So we need to look at that as a positive and say, Lord, what is it? Where is that deficit? Help me find that. Then he goes on and says, if we can take our loneliness as that sign and that there's something that we need to do to rectify the situation, loneliness can be a good thing. But if we become convinced that there is nothing we can do, and that there is no answer, and we allow ourselves to become trapped in that lie, then that is very dangerous. That's where loneliness grabs us. Matthew 28:20, Jesus said this: I am with you always, even unto the end of the age. God promises in Deuteronomy 31:6, in Joshua 1:5, and again in Hebrews 13:5. Must be an important promise. He repeats it 3 times. I will never leave you or forsake you. So God is with us at all times. He will never leave us or forsake us. Paul Meyer and Frank Minrath said that God's response to loneliness of humanity is not to back away from us, but to become more deeply involved in redeeming us from our human condition. God is there for us in all times. And so our first response whenever we get that wave of loneliness is to look to God, to draw closer to Jesus, because he is there at that moment to give us, just as Becca said. Jesus was asked, by one of the religious leaders. He was asked this question: which is the most important commandment? And this is what Jesus said: you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And then he went on, very important. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. Our drawing nearer to God is a way for us to draw closer to one another. And that is so critical to understand that God has created us to live in community. I think about growing up on the farm, and I think about Sundays. As Becca was talking about keeping the Sabbath holy, let me tell you what our Sabbath was about on the farm. As we would get up early in the morning, I would come down, and my dad would be out taking care of the livestock and doing the things that he needed to do there. But as I came down to the kitchen, my mother was putting into the oven every Sunday 2 chickens, 1 roast, 1 beef roast, and 1 pork roast. Those were all going into the oven. And then we would leave to go to church. And we would arrive at church at about 7 o'clock in the morning, and we would be done with church about noon. Because you see, my mom sang in the choir, she taught Sunday school, and we went to services. And yes, I went to early morning, watching my mom do choir practice, and then I went to Sunday school where my mom taught, and then we went together to church. And then several of our friends at church and all of our relatives would come to our house. We had a table that would seat 25 people. My dad built it. And my Aunt Louise would be peeling potatoes, and my Aunt Mary would be peeling carrots, and, Uncle Tom would be getting the coffee and this iced tea and everything made, and everybody was pitching in. And then all 25 would sit at the table, and most times us kids didn't get to sit at the table. We were at TV trays. That's how many people were there. And you know what I remember about it? More than the food, more than anything, is the stories. The stories would just be told, and everyone had their story, and they would share with one another, and there was just such beautiful noise. I think back to those times, and I just absolutely love it. There was great connection. Sabbath was the most beautiful day because we connected with God and we connected with one another. And now I have my family. They are spread from Southern California, Los Angeles area, all the way up to Calgary and all the way over to Winnipeg, Canada. They're everywhere. We get together when there's a wedding. There's going to be a wedding in September. We're all getting together. We get together for funerals, but we don't have the opportunity to come together every Sunday. So it's not things aren't the same. Our society is more mobile. We're spread out. So it can create loneliness in our lives if we don't realize that community is something that God has a plan for. As Becca said, it's maybe not what you wanted, but it's what God knew you needed. And I know for me, God gave me this church. God gave me all of you. You are that family. And it is such a beautiful thing to think about that we need those connections. Becca talked about in her generation, not coming to church on a regular basis. And how that's bringing a sense of loneliness into our lives. And, the highest index of loneliness is from age 44 to 49. I have a lot of theories about that, but I'm not going to go into it now. But there's a huge sense of loneliness at that age. But what's more, for me and my generation, a little bit concerning, a big bit concerning, is that the baby boomers used to be low on the index of loneliness, like single digit, and now they're up to 25%. A quarter of all baby boomers are suffering from loneliness. It never happened before. You know what else is happening? Baby boomers are leaving the church more than ever. They're disconnecting. They're saying, I'm too spiritual for the church. Or they're saying, I've got so many things going on in my life. I've got to take care of the grandkids. I've got to take care of aging parents. I've got to take care of all these things. I'm trying to save up enough money to actually retire. They're doing all these things, and what's happening is they're disconnecting. They're disconnecting from God, and they're disconnecting from one another. It's amazing. There's something supernatural about this time that you're in right now. There's something supernatural about sitting in a church with other people, worshiping God and listening to His word. I'm saying certain words, but God is speaking to you words that you need in your life. He's taking my words and He's using them to tell you in your heart what He wants to say to you. It's a supernatural thing. I can't explain it. But when we give that up, when we don't do that anymore, there's something that happens. And so I just want to encourage us all that it's important to understand our connection with God and our connection with one another are equally important. And it's the only thing that will solve this whole thing of loneliness, the epidemic of loneliness in our world. Rhonda, come and share with us, please.
Thank you, Linda. Do you want your little iPad? In 1993, I had an experience that woke me up to the fact that my relationship with Christ wasn't at the depth where I thought it should be. I got invited to be a part of a question and answer panel of single Christian women. And we were also talking to single women, and they could ask us anything they wanted. At first, their questions were pretty simple. How do you deal with your loneliness? And we were answering with good biblical principles. But then one woman in the audience asked, okay, now some of you have been married. How do you let Jesus satisfy your physical longings and desire now that you're single again? Dead silence in the room. We didn't know what to say. And that same woman looked at us and went, ha! All right. Shame on you, basically, is what she was saying. How can you sit up there and try and give us godly answers when you don't even know how to let God answer those same questions in your own life? Wow. We stumbled a little bit, quoted a few scriptures, went on to a different subject, got through it. And it left me with the knowledge that I wasn't as close to my Heavenly Father as I thought that I was. I was born into a Christian home. My dad was the song leader and the Sunday school superintendent, and my mom was the church soloist. You're not surprised at that, right? But when I was 12 years old, my father decided to abandon our family. 12 years old is such a hard time for a young girl. You're just starting to identify who you are. And I lost my identity when my dad left. I had a really tough time. We encouraged our mom. She didn't want to go back to church. She was so embarrassed with my dad's absence. Just remember, back then, divorce wasn't as rampant as it is today. But she went ahead and gave in to us, so we continued to attend church. When I was 15, I went to youth camp and I gave my heart to Christ. And as I grew up, my faith did too. My faith in God grew. I went to Seattle Pacific University, got my degree there. And a few years later, I found and married my husband. And 4 years after I got married to him, and 2 little boys later, 2 babies later, he decided that he would abandon me. And he did. Ding, my dad left me when I was 12. And ding, my husband left me again when I was married. No identity. No identity. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I was going to do. I went on welfare for 4 years, taking care of my babies. That was a tough decision, but I had no other choice. Thank God that that's in place for those of us who need it when we need it. But the relationship that I thought would bring me joy completely drained me of it in my life. This season of single parenting went on for 15 years. And along with my loneliness, like I said, I just didn't know who I was. I tried to fill my loneliness with a bunch of empty relationships. I thought for sure, I could be fulfilled if it was through another relationship. Well, guess what? It really wasn't. And even though I was involved in a lot of churches, there were a couple of churches that I was really a major part of. What they didn't know is that I would cry myself to sleep at night. And I would wonder how my life had turned out so hard and so terrible, walked a completely different path than I thought it would, when my future had looked so bright at one point in my life. Deep inside, I knew that my relationship to God was the answer, but I was fearful that God might require me to give up some things in my life that I didn't want to. Well, God led me to Washington Cathedral in 1995, and I met and married my husband here. Sometimes he plays drums up here for you, if you don't know who he is, Ted, and married him in 2000. I love him very much, but one thing I've also learned in marriage, even though he fills a lot of my needs, he doesn't fill every need. There's a hole there, and I believe our Creator made us this way on purpose, that only he can fill. Only he can fill. He gives us that identity, that purpose, tells us who we are and how much he loves us when we allow him to do that. And my selfish reasoning for not seeking a daily intimate time with God finally came to an end about 3 years ago. I forgot to tell you that. In all my Christian walk, I had never disciplined myself enough to have that daily walk with God. But I hadn't. I loved him with as much as I could understand of who he was in my life. I loved him with my whole heart. But finally, 3 years ago, Pastor Ray was here, and he led the staff through a book called Building a Discipling Culture. And this book taught me how to find my identity in Christ. Now, my husband complains sometimes because when he wakes up in the morning, he reaches over and he tries to find me there, and I'm not there. It's because I've found that time, the most precious time for me is at the beginning of the day. Before the house stirs, I have to get up. I have to go seek that time with Jesus. I have to see what he wants to tell me for the day. I have to open my heart to him. Let him tell me and reassure me once again how much he loves me. All through the years, I memorized the scripture that has stuck with me all my life, and now it's more true to my heart than ever. Jeremiah 29:11 through 13. For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for calamity, to give you a future and a hope. And then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. And you will seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. And that's what I've been doing. I've been seeking God with all my heart. And I will continue to do that because I have found wholeness. My loneliness is gone. He fills every need in my heart. Praise God for his word and his faithfulness.
Thank you, Rhonda. Let's give her a hand for sharing. That's always hard to do. Let's stand together. I want to leave you with some words from one of my favorite kind of spiritual fathers in his writing, and that's Henry Nouwen. And he says this: laying our hearts totally open to God leads to a love of ourselves that enables us to give wholehearted love to our fellow human beings. Let me pray with you and for you. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for your deep, abiding, and intimate love that you have for us. Lord, my prayer for each of us, Lord, is that that love can be such a part of our lives, Lord, that it fills all those empty places. And that, Lord, it gives us the strength to be the kind of friend, companion, husband, wife, mother, father. Lord, it gives us that ability to be those people that you designed us to be. To be there for the people that you put in our lives. Lord, help us to put our focus first on you. And to bring in your love and show that out to the world around us. Lord, I ask a special blessing on each person here. I pray that you will be with them as they go out of this place. Bless them, keep them. And that they may always know your presence in their lives. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.